Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated economist here. Got a couple of links I want to share with you guys. I just read the speech from the Federal Reserve from Governor Brainard. It was the most recent Fed speech given. I'll leave a link down in the description for you guys. And it's talking about the inflation and the monetary policy to deal with this inflation. And I thought it was a pretty good speech because really she breaks it down to how the inflation affects the different income levels to households. So like, you're a low income household, the way inflation hits you is much different from the higher income households. And for example, like using cereal for an example, like just regular breakfast cereal. If you're a higher income household and the amount of money that you're putting towards necessities is much less, like I think in the speech they said it was like 18% of your income goes to necessities, where if you're a low income household it may be up to like 77%. So here you're a higher income household, 18% of your income is going to necessities, and here we have this inflation kicking in and all of a sudden the prices are going up. But if you're a higher income household, it may be the case that you have been buying like a name brand cereal. So when the prices increase, you can go from the name brand down to a generic brand cereal and save that money that has gone to increases to the cereal. So you go from the name brand down to the generic brand, and your standard of living or your cost of living doesn't really go up any. You just adjust what brand of cereal you're actually consuming. But if you're a low income household and you're already consuming the generic, the lower end cereal, there's nowhere for you to go. You just have to absorb these higher prices. So it affects the lower income more dramatically than it does the higher income, simply because they have no way to adjust their purchases to, like, say, absorb the cost of increases by dropping it down to the generic brand. Does that kind of make sense, the way I said that? Anyhow, I thought that was pretty interesting, in how the Federal Reserve is actually trying to say, hey, there's no way of really calculating this, so we don't really have a clear picture of how inflation is actually affecting all households because of this, variation that takes place. And she goes into a little bit more detail on it, but I thought it was quite good. But then there's one line in this speech where it comes to talking about the monetary policy and dealing with this inflation, this price inflation. And I thought it was quite interesting the way she says it, because we talk a lot about credible threats. And if you haven't heard me talk about credible threats, I got it from a Bernake speech from back in like 2000, long before quantitative easings and all the other stuff that had taken place. Bernake knew that we were going to run into lower interest rates, like zero interest rates, and that the adjusting of monetary policy by lowering the Fed funds rate was just no longer going to be an effective tool, because there's just simply not enough room to move any longer. But he said that was okay because the Fed still has a lot of tools to use. And now they call it like forward guidance or job owning or front loading. I mean, they just pretty much the monetary policy of credible threats is that the Federal Reserve is going to scream long ahead of time what they are going to do, so that the markets will condition themselves to absorb whatever it is that the Federal Reserve is going to do. Right? Now, that's why you hear so much about lifting of interest rates. For months now, we've been hearing about it before the Federal Reserve actually does any lifting of interest rates, because they don't want to shock the market by saying, okay, we are going to lift interest rates today, right? They're going to tell them months ahead of time, hey, we are going to do this, so that they can position themselves and get ready for it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do it. Now, the way Bernake described it was with a story of a guy who invents a gold machine, and with this gold machine he could produce as much gold at will with very little cost or energy. So the moment that this information gets out that this guy has invented this gold machine, the price of gold on the market would plummet, as they just assume that this guy is going to be able to flood the market with as much gold as he wants for no cost or energy. So even before the guy produces a single ounce of gold, just that information alone would be enough to move the markets around. That's the credible threat. And we saw a good example of it with the special purpose vehicles, and I've talked about this in recent videos too, where the Federal Reserve had set up a corporate lending facility where they said that they were going to be buying corporate debt, and the news was dramatic. A lot of people were talking about how the Federal Reserve is going to be picking the winners and losers. And they talked about fallen angels, that they were going to be making sure to, to protect the fallen angels and stuff like that. Well, they did set up this special purpose vehicle, which was an entity separated from the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, in conjunction with the Treasury, right? They set this thing up. They funded it with a lot of money, hundreds of billions of dollars, bought a little bit of that corporate debt, and it sent a panic through the market that the Federal Reserve was going to be doing this. And the market started trying to front run the Federal Reserve by buying up the corporate debt. The Federal Reserve sat back and just said, hey boys, great job. We didn't have to do anything. And all these corporations are getting all the bond purchases they need, right? Because all the market's thinking that the Federal Reserve is going to be stepping in and doing it. So they're buying those corporate bonds before the Fed does. Fed didn't have to do anything. It was an excellent, excellent example of credible threats. Now, in this speech, she has this one line, and I thought it was really interesting the way it was worded. Now listen to this. The reduction in the balance sheet will contribute to monetary policy tightening over and above the expected increases in policy rate reflected in market pricing. Did you get that? The reduction in the balance sheet will contribute to monetary policy tightening over and above the expected increases in policy rates reflected in monetary pricing and market pricing. I'm sorry. So what I hear on that is that the markets are going to expect this particular rate increase. They're going to condition themselves for this rate increase. Whatever it is that rate increase is, the Federal Reserve and their reduction of the balance sheet will contribute to a monetary policy tightening that's over and above that expectation. They're going to over-tighten the monetary policy more than what the markets are anticipating. And the markets are anticipating a lot. But even by their own words in this speech, the reduction in the balance sheet will contribute to monetary policy tightening over and above the expected increases in policy rate reflected in market pricing. Right? They're going to lift interest rates during a time when everybody is going to be screaming, saying that they are damaging the economy, they are making the wrong move, they are doing everything incorrectly, just like they are telling them now that they waited too long, that inflation got out of control, that they're late, that they missed their mark, they missed their target. I don't think so. I think that they are very well aware of the position that everybody is in, the position that they are in, and what the markets are anticipating them to do, because they plan on reducing the balance sheet and contribute to monetary policy tightening that is over and above the expected increase in policy rate reflected by the market pricing. She said it right there. It's going to be extra tight monetary policy. This is where I feel that the Federal Reserve is going to cause the dollar to be incredibly strong. Will it force a recession? It seems like it. Everybody keeps talking about a recession. I have a tendency to believe that as the recession kicks in, that they're going to come out with some other monetary policy or fiscal policy, something like a UBI kind of thing, because Janet Yellen has already said that she doubts she'll ever see another recession in her lifetime. And if we go through anything like we did through the last recession, because people don't even remember that we had a recession or realize that we had a recession just recently, and that all the stimulus and papering over and the forbearances and everything else that went into it covered up that recession. So we didn't even really feel like we had a recession. Everybody just blames it on the pandemic. Anyway, what else did I want to talk about? The other thing I wanted to leave down in the description for you guys is an article talking about the mortgage-backed securities, since we were just recently talking about those mortgage-backed securities and who's going to be the buyer of these things. And this is really where I think a lot of people are looking to see what's going to happen with the housing market. Because if these mortgage-backed securities can't find a buyer for them, the price of them is going to continue to fall and the yield's going to continue to rise, and those mortgages that people take out are going to have an incredibly high interest rate to them, making it very burdensome on them making the payment, and therefore the asset price itself can't necessarily support the buyers that are out there or be supported by the buyers out there. So this is the thing that we have to really keep an eye on if you want to know what's going to go on in the housing market, is one, inventory of homes, new sale homes, and what comes onto the market, and the other one is the mortgage-backed securities and whether or not there is going to be a buyer of these mortgage-backed securities as the Federal Reserve goes to reduce their balance sheet by selling off a lot of these mortgage-backed securities. So anyway, uneducated economist, you guys let me know.